The Pineywoods ecoregion is a mosaic of woodlands, forests, and prairies dissected by rivers, lakes, and marshes. Covering much of the eastern border of Texas, this ecoregion stretches from the Red River in the north to the edge of the Gulf Coast prairies at its southernmost point. Numerous species of neotropical birds, waterfowl, fur bearers, and reptiles inhabit this heavily forested and historically diverse ecosystem. But by the early 1900s, the demand on this timber-rich resource began to change the landscape.
There are two major threats facing the Pineywoods ecosystem in Texas. The first being some of the historical practices of the logging industry, and the second being the loss of bottomland hardwoods to reservoir construction. The logging industry has replaced a lot of the diverse pine forests and replaced them with basically loblolly pine. And so what we're seeing is reduced biodiversity in our pine forests.
The forest is harvested at a much younger age than it would have grown to in a natural setting. Shortleaf pine forest in northeast Texas, for instance, would live anywhere from 150 to 200 plus years of age biologically. The rotation age on pine timber today is somewhere between 25 and 35 years.
Today, however, modern forestry is striving for sustainability. Many corporations within the timber industry now participate in the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which certifies their products based on responsible management practices. One such practice is establishing streamside management zones where logging activity is greatly minimized to protect water quality and help prevent non-point source pollution. But there are wildlife species still recovering from the loss of old-growth forests in East Texas. One of these species is the federally endangered red-cockaded woodpecker.
In mature pine savanna forested habitat, one keystone species for that habitat is the red-cockaded woodpecker. A keystone species is an indicator species for an entire ecosystem. So when you have problems with that species, you have problems with an entire suite of species.
Fire helps maintain forested systems like the Pineywoods, clearing out the understory vegetation while leaving the older, more established pine trees.
In many habitats, understory is an essential component to the ecosystem. But in East Texas, many species are adapted to flying in between the trees, much like a quail runs in between the grasses in a prairie ecosystem. The red-cockaded woodpecker, however, requires really big, really old pine trees in which to nest, and they nest in them year after year. And they require a clear understory in order to move among the trees.
But today, natural fires are usually suppressed for the safety of people, their homes, and businesses, which consequently impacts the historical role fire played in these forests. This is why prescribed burning is such an important part of habitat restoration within the Pineywoods.
Probably one of the greatest ecological restoration tools, other than allowing these forests to grow to a later age, would be to apply prescribed burning adequately to these forests. So when you perform management for that species, the red-cockaded woodpecker, by promoting mature pine forests and managing them for an open park-like condition with a grassy herbaceous understory, then you're also managing for other species like brown-headed nuthatch, Bachman's sparrow, and a number of other species like Louisiana pine snake, which is a state-listed threatened snake that's one of the rarest snakes on the North American continent.
Throughout the Pineywoods ecoregion, water is a key component in maintaining the health of bottomland hardwoods. Periodic flooding replenishes the soil, supporting a diverse plant and animal community. But human needs for this same water is having a profound impact.
We probably lost anywhere from 70 to 80% of the original bottomland hardwood forest that occurred in East Texas because of reservoir construction. And these reservoirs, although they're very important for human needs for water, they have altered the hydrology of the landscape so that water does not move along that landscape in the same way it did historically.
Changes in hydrology here impacted one of the oldest known aquatic species, The paddlefish.
The paddlefish used to move up native river systems to spawn, and it migrated to spawn, and it needed clear water over shallow gravel beds to spawn. Well, with the changed hydrology, number one, it can't migrate up those river systems anymore. Number two, because the water levels have been changed and they stay higher for longer periods of time during the spawning, those fish cannot spawn anymore.
In addition to timber harvesting and reservoir construction, population growth is also beginning to impact East Texas.
An emerging threat that we're starting to see in the Piney Woods is urbanization. Our human population in this state is exploding, and urbanization is creeping into the Piney Woods just like it is many other habitats of this state. The problems with urbanization are many. One is fragmentation, just simply a loss of that continuity of habitat.
So you end up with a checkerboard or patchwork type mosaic, and the arrangement of those patches becomes critical to wildlife. Some species need broad expansive forest, and those species are in peril, particularly things like neotropical migratory birds in bottomland hardwood type forest habitats. Also, many areas that were in bottomland hardwoods that could grow loblolly pine have been converted to loblolly pine because it pays more at the finished product than the bottomland hardwoods do. So you end up with, in many places, a very artificial landscape, very different from the original landscape.
Another problem with increasing urbanization in the Piney Woods is the introduction of invasive species. People plant Chinese tallow or Asian privet in the yards, and those plants escape into our natural systems. And these invasive plants are causing tremendous problems in East Texas.
Conservation and restoration efforts are essential for the survival of this ecosystem. The Texas Wildlife Action Plan encourages continued technical guidance as well as incentives for private landowners to voluntarily protect wildlife habitats.
Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and the Texas Forest Service jointly work with private landowners to enroll them in conservation agreements so that we've relieved them of the fear of having red-cockaded woodpecker.
It's encouraging to see that the logging industry is changing some of the historic practices and is moving away from replacing some of the clear-cut areas with monocultured stands of loblolly pine. We're beginning to see a little more diversity being planted back into the areas that have been harvested.
Industry steps to promote diversity is a positive direction, but water conservation, invasive plants and animals, as well as land fragmentation and erosion will continue to be important challenges facing the Piney Woods ecoregion.
We need to strive to work with landowners, with corporate landowners, government entities, to try to manage as much of this habitat as we can